Alright, I wanted to talk about hanging numerals because we referenced it in class, but it's not the easiest thing to get a hold of. They are super essential though, particularly when you're styling a list, like we are for endnotes. The way a user uses this list as it pertains to hanging numerals is that these serve as kind of an entry point. You can quickly bounce back and forth between the story and the reference and find your entry point really quickly because they're hanging out here in space. But in order to do that, you got to work a little creative magic in InDesign. So I'm going to show you how to do that. There are actually a couple of ways you can. One is a little bit more dirty, although it works if you just have a few and they're not trying to get too deep into the weeds. The other is a little more preferred for some reasons I'll show you in just a second. But we'll start with the maybe quick and dirty way. So the first thing I'm going to do, and just about any time I'm in design really, is turn on show hidden characters. And what that is going to do is pull up all these little notations for what's going on behind the scenes. It's really important, particularly if InDesign starts to behave oddly and you're trying to diagnose why. A lot of times it has to do with some weird character that got drug over from Word, even though that's not where we grabbed our information from. Sometimes bits and pieces of the HTML come over with it, or the way they formatted things in the HTML bounce over too. Anyway, having these on gives you a great deal of information. So right now, what this list is comprised of, and I'll show you by actually clicking in here, is that I've typed the number 1, and then there's a space, and then there's the information. So for every one of these, there is a physical number floating out here that I've assigned it. So what this means is that I can change this to 5. InDesign doesn't really care or know. There's no numerical value that it assigns to it. This is just another character. That's important as we get to the next version, the more clean version. But if we want to style this, I'll show you what's going on in our paragraph styles. I'm calling this endnotes without because it doesn't have bullets or true numbering. I'll double click on this and slide this over so you can see what's going on. Fundamentally though, what's happening here is that we've assigned, and I'll revert this to 0, and you can see how it starts to behave. We've made a full left indent, and you have to do this one first. For instance, if you try and do well, that's not entirely true, but these two numbers can't exceed one another. So we're doing a first line indent, and then we're doing a full left indent. And then see, we're going to, right now, they line up, and we're going to start moving this first line into negative space. And right now they more or less line up. Now things get a little weird. I'll show you as we cruise down here to double digits. Things start to get a little janky. Excuse me. We'll go back in here, and you can kind of fine tune that through the indents and spacing. Maybe this needs to hang out a little more, but then at some point you're going to run into this. It's a little warning. It says the indent value is invalid. It can't go outside of this blue boxed text frame. InDesign is fairly dumb in that regard. And then the other issue that you'll run into is that for double digits, they tend to float or align perfectly, but then single digits, if it's a double line, start to extend beyond. And it's kind of a one or the other situation. Whereas the way I'll show you next is going to be a little healthier in terms of what it looks like visually. Now the final thing you'd want to do to clean this up, as always, is to click Story and then Optical Margin Alignment, and that will help to some degree with things like the quotation marks that take up less optical space. You already know that. So then on this one, this is with true bullets and numerals. So we'll return to paragraph styles, and I'll show you what's going on. Let me cancel this and drag it over so we can see both at the same time. So this is the preferred way to do it. First thing you'll do is come in and you will select, typically this would be none, That's what your list would look like. You can turn on bullets and you can assign a bullet, but in this case we want numbers. And this is the format. So you could format this A, B, C, D, 001, 002, etc. We're just going to pick simply 1, 2, 3, 4. And then what this says is that we're going to do a number followed by a tab space. And you can add that simply through this special insert special character. You can also assign a character style to this, just as an aside that this could be, for instance, a red number in a different font as it pertains to a already existing style. And then down here, this is where you're going to set your bullet or number position. And this is kind of similar to what we did previously. These two are intrinsically linked. You can see set a full left indent of 1 pica and a first line indent. Now originally with that tab space, that's what that looked like. But because we're setting this to a negative first line indent, everything starts to line up really well. You can also adjust it here if you need it to creep in. Those are the two primary places that you'll adjust that value. I find it's most useful to deal with it here, but if something is out of whack, like it was for one of your classmates, double check here in tabs that this isn't predefined, because it's my understanding that will override what you put into bullets and numbering. So we'll cruise down here and you can see how much more aligned it is. We still need to go back on to the story palette and click optical margin alignment, and that'll force that to hang. And now when we view the two side by side, you can see how much more manicured this looks like. This is a straight line, this is a straight line. There's so much more undulation. Now the final thing that this this preferred method alleviates is, let's say I accidentally omitted a note that I need to add later. So let's go over here and I'll hit a hard return and I'm going to put the information in, and now I need to type 7 and a space. Well, now I have to come down and renumber every single one. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, this is some term paper and I've got 400 endnotes, which is not all that uncommon, believe it or not. This is going to get very, very tedious. You're going to have to manually readjust all those. But now let's say I want to come in here. Because I've set it up through numbers and there is a numerical value that's actually attached to this, when I hit return, when I copy and paste my information, everything has cascaded down. It's reordered those for me. This is now 7 by default. Everything preceding it, following it rather, becomes the correct numeral. So that's probably the final reason why you would want to set it up. Take the time to do it this way. You never know when you're going to have to throw something in at the last minute. This just becomes a lot quicker to adjust, assuming that you take the time to do it right. Hope that helps. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.